The clearing felt like it had been plunged into a vat of ice. 18 years old. A girl who looked like she belonged in a painting of the celestial quartz, standing there with the power of an element-gathering master radiating from her skin. Hang Zan's brain stalled for a second, but then his heart began to pound with a toxic, oily lust. So what if she broke through? At her age, she was a novice. A child playing with a veteran's toys. Elder Yu had lived in the element-gathering tier for decades. He would crush her like a porcelain doll. And then. Oh, and then. Hang Zan licked his lips. To break a goddess like that? To pin a master under his body and hear her scream for mercy? The thought made his blood boil. Elder Yu, take her, he shrieked, his voice cracking with unbridled greed. Elder Yu moved forward, his cautious expression masking a predatory confidence. He saw a girl. He didn't see a threat. To him, she was at the first or second layer. Maybe the third if she was a true freak of nature. He was at the 9th layer. He was a wall of iron that had stood against 1,000 storms. Young miss, surrender, the old man rasped. Don't make me break those pretty bones. Lu Yutong's eyes didn't just flash, they turned into shards of frozen glass. She was the princess of the great Lu clan. In the imperial city, the Stone Wolf sect was nothing but a pack of stray dogs. That this filth, this insect Hang Zan, dared to look at her with such foul intent. It was a sin that could only be washed away in blood. She glanced at Ling Han, a silent question in her eyes. Ling Han didn't even look up. He just shrugged, his voice casual and brutal. A bastard like that? If you want him dead, kill him. Boom. Lu Yutong unleashed her aura. She didn't hold back a single drop. The air around her shattered as the full, suffocating weight of the 9th layer of element-gathering tier exploded outward. It hit Elder Yu like a physical blow, matching his power pound for pound, scream for scream. What? Elder Yu's face went the color of ash. His knees nearly buckled. The 9th layer? At 18? How is this possible? Lu Dong and the others felt their souls leave their bodies. To reach the 9th layer of body refining at 20 was a dream. But the 9th layer of element gathering? That was a legend. That was the kind of power they expected to see in 10, 15 years. Not in a girl who looked like a mountain spring. Elder Yu's arrogance evaporated. He snapped his hands into a respectful clasp, his voice trembling. Miss. Please. Forgive my young master's mouth. I apologize for his ignorance. He wasn't just afraid of her. He was terrified of whatever monster of a sect had raised such a terrifying genius. Hang Zan's face twisted. He was a coward at heart, and the realization that he had just tried to leash a tiger made his stomach turn. But Lu Yutong wasn't interested in apologies. Get out of my way, she spat, her voice like the snapping of a frozen branch. Miss, don't push us, Elder Yu snarled, his back straightening once more. He couldn't let Hang Zan die. If the boy fell, the 7th elder would flay the old man alive. Lu Yutong didn't waste another word, she lunged. Snapping of the plum hands, Elder Yu roared, his fingers hooking into lethal talons, flying eagle claws. The battle was a blur of violence. They moved so fast that Lu Dong and the others could only see streaks of shadow and hear the thunderous crack of bone-breaking force. For minutes, it was a stalemate of high-speed slaughter. But then, the pace slowed. The observers thought they were tiring. Ling Han knew better. This is the end, Ling Han thought, his eyes narrowing. The speed had dropped because every move was now a gamble with death. 1 inch off, 1 second late, and your life ended. He had guided Lu Yutong for days, pouring his ancient, heaven-tier wisdom into her soul. If she had listened, if she had truly learned, the old man was already a corpse. Elder Yu was drowning in sweat. He felt the cold finger of the Reaper on his neck. He couldn't even blink. He couldn't beg. The pressure from this girl was a mountain falling on his chest. Lu Yutong, however, was becoming a void, calm, lethal, absolute. Hang Zan saw the shift. He saw his protector faltering. Terror, cold and sharp, pierced his gut. He turned to bolt. Running so soon? Ling Han appeared in front of him like a ghost, his sword already half drawn. Get back! Hang Zan screamed, his voice high and thin. I'm Stone Wolf sect. You touch me and my grandfather will butcher your entire bloodline. He'll pull the skin from your face. Ling Han's gaze didn't waver. It was the look of a man watching an ant crawl toward a fire. He drew his sword, the steel singing a low, mournful note. Ling Han, stop! Lu Dong cried out, his voice full of panic. The sect will kill us all. Ha ha! Listen to your friend, boy, Hang Zan sneered, even as he shook. You're lucky today. Get out of my way and I might let you live. He tried to push past, but the air suddenly turned cold. The edge of a blade was pressed against his throat, biting into the skin. Hang Zhan froze. He felt the warm prickle of blood. He felt his bladder start to fail. "There is no one on this earth that I dare not kill," Ling Han whispered. "Kneel." Hang Zhan hit the dirt, his mind racing with visions of the torture he would inflict on Ling Han once he was safe. "I'll take your girls. I'll watch you burn." "Apologize," Ling Han commanded. I'm sorry. I'm an animal. Please," Hang Zhan blubbered, his head bowed. "I hope you're a better man in your next life," Ling Han said softly. "No," flash. A silver arc tore through the air. Hang Zhan's scream died in his throat as a fountain of crimson erupted. He fell forward, his eyes wide, staring at the dirt in a state of eternal disbelief. Ling Han had actually done it. He had cut the head off the snake. At that exact moment, Lu Yutong let out a sharp cry. Her palm connected with Elder Yu's chest with a sound like a hammer hitting a stone. The old man stood perfectly still for 3 seconds, his eyes vacant. Then, he collapsed into a heap of broken bones and wasted life. The clearing was silent, save for the heavy breathing of the survivors. "The Stone Wolf Sect," Lu Dong whispered, his voice trembling with a raw, crushing despair. "You've just signed our death warrants. This is a catastrophe." Ling Han wiped his blade on the grass, his expression as calm as a moonlit lake. "No," he said. "This is just the beginning." Ling Han flicked the blood from his blade with a cold, mechanical precision. He turned to the survivors, a thin, jagged smile cutting across his face. "Will you tell anyone of what has happened here today?" "Of course not," Lu Dong and the others stammered, their voices thin with terror. They didn't just fear the Stone Wolf Sect anymore. They feared the boy standing over the corpses. "It's all right, then," Ling Han said, his voice dropping to a low, lethal hum. "None of us will speak. And if no one speaks, who will ever find these two rotting in the dirt?" Lu Dong and his crew didn't wait for a second invitation. The name, Stone Wolf Sect, was a death sentence that hung over their heads like a guillotine. They fled into the trees, clutching their green spiritual fruits as if they were shields, terrified that Ling Han might decide a few more dead witnesses were safer than a promise. Ling Han watched them vanish. He didn't care. He had his own shadow, Lu Yutong. Against the princess of the great Lu clan, the Stone Wolf Sect was nothing but a pack of yapping curs. If they were smart, they'd thank him for the favor of killing their arrogant brat before she decided to erase the whole sect from the map. Ling Han turned his attention to the spoils. He was practical. He was brutal. He stripped the bodies of Hang Zhan and Elder Yu with the cold efficiency of a scavenger. 100,000 silver coins, a decent haul. But the real prize was a tattered manual. Detonation arts. It was a vicious skill, allowing a warrior to pump origin power into an object until it exploded like a shard grenade. It was a coward's weapon, but in a life-or-death struggle, it was a beautiful way to end a fight. Elder Yu hadn't mastered it yet. If he had, Lu Yutong might be more than just tired right now. "Let's move," Ling Han grunted. The smell of fresh blood was beginning to sour the air. They found a new clearing, away from the stench of the dead. Ling Han sat, the first green spiritual fruit in his hand. He didn't savor it. He tore into it in large, savage bites. It was sweet, but he was hungry for the power, not the taste. Boom! The medicinal effect hit his gut like a physical strike, shattering into a million burning particles that raced through his veins. Ling Han didn't just meditate, he commanded. He circulated the 5 elements heaven-grade skill, his dantian glowing like a dying star. The middle of the 7th layer. The peak, 8th layer. The energy didn't stop. It scoured his veins, tempering his bones until the fruit's power finally simmered down at the middle of the 8th layer. 6 days saved, he whispered, his eyes snapping open. 8 days later, he was at the peak of the 8th. By dawn the next morning, he stood up, his bones popping with new, raw strength. The 9th layer of body refining. Lu Yutong watched him, her expression a mask of numb disbelief. She had seen geniuses, but Ling Han was a wildfire. He was burning through the tears with a speed that defied reality. 10 more days of slaughter and meditation passed. Ling Han reached the final bottleneck. "Today is my last day in the body refining tier," he said, looking at the second green spiritual fruit. He let out a long, weary sigh. "Gods, it really has been a very long time." Lu Yutong nearly choked. 1 month. It had been 1 month since he was a second layer, trash, in Great Cloud Town. She wanted to scream, to point out the absurdity, but she only rolled her eyes. To Ling Han, time was measured in the thousands of years of his past life. This month was an eternity of being weak. He swallowed the second fruit. He didn't rush, he let the energy build. Half an hour later, his skin was vibrating. His veins felt like they were packed with gunpowder. He was a water pouch filled to the point of bursting. One wrong move and he'd be a red smear on the grass. It's time, he thought. Body refining was about storing power in the meat and bone. Element gathering was about shattering the limits and carving a hole in reality itself, the Dantian. Hong. An internal explosion rocked his soul. Most martial artists had to chip away at the barrier for weeks. Ling Han hit it with a tidal wave. A slit appeared. Then a hole. Then a void. But he wasn't done. He reached into the chaos and began to spin the energy. Faster. Faster. Until it became a screaming, high-speed nucleus. The origin nucleus. The motor of a god. In that moment, the body refiner died. A master of the element gathering tier stood in his place. The floodgates were open, and the power that gushed out was no longer a trickle, it was an avalanche. Opening the Dantian was only the half victory. Without the origin nucleus, a martial artist was nothing more than a bigger bucket with no way to pour the water out. The Dantian raised the limit of what you could store, but the nucleus, that high-speed engine of the soul, was what transformed potential energy into a violent, world-shattering force. In the history of the nine heavens, countless fools had reached the ninth layer of body refining only to die of old age because they couldn't spark that first nucleus. The element gathering tier allowed for 9 nuclei in total. Only when the ninth was perfected could a warrior even dream of the gushing spring. For Ling Han, this should have been child's play. He had walked this path 9 times in his previous life. He knew the rhythm of the soul better than he knew his own heartbeat. He began. He gathered the raw, roaring origin power, weaving it together with the practiced ease of a god. The power solidified, spinning into a needle-thin point of light. But then, the world in his mind exploded. Ling Han recoiled in mental shock. Within the void of his Dantian, he didn't see one spark, he saw 5. How? He roared internally. He had just broken through. Was it possible to leap directly to the 5th layer of element gathering in a single breath? No, that was madness. These 5 nuclei were tiny, far from their peak. But they were there, shifting, repelling, and attracting one another in a delicate, lethal dance. And they were colored. Gold, green, white, red, black. The 5 elements. Gold, wood, water, fire, and earth. A realization hit him like a physical blow. An immortal-grade spirit base. A multi-elemental alignment. It doesn't just store more, it creates more. In his past life, he had never heard of this. But then, who would reveal such a trump card? Who would tell the world they had 5 hearts instead of 1? He examined the balance. It was precarious. If one nucleus grew too large, it would consume the others. They were interdependent. They were a collective. If they combined their output, Ling Han whispered, his spirit trembling, I will have 5 times the origin power of any man alive. But it was more than that. Because they were perfectly balanced, the synergy wasn't additive. It was multiplicative. 6 times the power. 10 times. If he reached the peak of the 1st layer, he could stand toe-to-toe with a monster of the 4th layer and break their bones with ease. This was the true, terrifying face of an immortal-grade spirit base. There was a price, of course. Strengthening 5 engines would be 5 times slower than strengthening 1. His cultivation speed would plummet. And his Dantian, despite its size, was still a limited vessel. He would burn through his reserves like a wildfire. He wouldn't be able to fight for days, he would have to end every battle in seconds. So be it, Ling Han growled, his eyes flashing with a cold, predatory light. I don't need days. I only need a moment to turn my enemies to ash. I am the Alchemy Emperor. I will find the pills to bridge the gap. If I can't reach the heaven tier again with these advantages, I might as well find a block of tofu and bash my own brains out. He turned his focus back to the remnants of the green spiritual fruit, using the lingering medicinal fire to expand the walls of his Dantian and sharpen the edges of his 5 nuclei. He was an excavator now, carving out a kingdom within himself. He moved with extreme caution, ensuring not a single nucleus outweighed the others. The balance was his life. But as he dug deeper into his own soul, he stopped. His mental eyes went wide. The air in his spirit felt suddenly ancient, desolate, and heavy enough to crush a mountain. A black tower was drifting in the center of his Dantian. It exuded a pale golden light, a silent, dignified presence that seemed to connect the floor of his soul to the roof of the heavens. It had 9 levels, and it felt 10,000 meters tall. Ling Han's blood turned to ice. Even after 10,000 years, he would know this tower. Even if it were burnt to cinders and scattered across the void, he would recognize the shape of his own death. This was the very thing that had killed him in his previous life. You. Ling Han's internal voice was a raw, jagged snarl of fury and terror. How are you here? Was killing me once not enough? Did you follow me into a second life just to finish the job? The tower didn't answer. It simply hung there, ancient and silent, a monument to his own destruction sitting right in the center of his new power. In his last life, Ling Han had clawed through the shadows of the black light ground valley to find it. The Black Tower. He had seen the golden script of the indestructible heaven scroll carved into its ancient skin, and it was supposed to be his greatest triumph. Instead, it was his executioner. One casual, indifferent tremor from that tower had ground his physical body into ash. For 10,000 years, his soul had drifted in a void, anchored to nothingness. And now, looking at that same tower rooted in the center of his soul, even the ironclad mind of a heaven-tier warrior trembled. In his past life, it had erased him like a mistake. Now, it was a permanent resident in his dantian. But Ling Han wasn't a fool. If the tower wanted him dead again, it wouldn't have waited. It wouldn't have carried his soul across an ocean of time to this new body. The realization hit him with the weight of a mountain. The tower hadn't just killed him, it had reset him. It had given him 10,000 years of silence to master the heaven scroll in spirit form because the mortal body could never have endured the strain. Brother, Ling Han whispered into the void of his own mind, his voice a jagged mix of resentment and awe. Should I thank you for the second chance, or hate you for the first death? The tower stood silent. 9 floors of ancient, weathered mystery. Only the bottom door remained, tightly sealed against his will. The other floors didn't even have windows. It was an object that defied the laws of the mortal plane. An artifact from a divine realm beyond the sky. Ling Han lashed out with his consciousness, trying to force his way in. He was the master of this soul, wasn't he? Rebound. The tower threw his mental power back at him with the casual disdain of a giant swatting a fly. He tried again. And again. He was relentless, a man who had already died once and feared nothing. Finally, the tower seemed to lose its patience. It gave a slight tremor. A flash of raw, high-level consciousness flooded his brain. It wasn't words. It was a truth burned into his mind. You're too weak. You're a gnat trying to enter a palace. Come back when you reach the gushing spring tier. But, as my current host, I will grant you a single blessing. For every new tier you reach, I will allow you to borrow my power once. A single strike, a single moment, where you will wield the power of the tier above your own. One blessing per tier. A one-time use trump card. If he was in the element gathering tier, he could, for one brief, terrifying second, strike with the fury of a gushing spring master. Stingy, Ling Han grumbled, though his heart was thundering. A master of the tier above? That wasn't just a trump card, that was a god slayer. He opened his eyes. Lu Yutong was staring at him, looking like she wanted to cry. He had just leapt into a new realm in a single afternoon, and he looked disappointed. To any other martial artist, he would be a monster worth killing out of pure envy. Let's go, Ling Han said, snapping his fingers. I'm homesick. They moved like the wind. The journey that had taken half a day before now took less than an hour. Ling Han's dantian was a furnace, pumping out 10 times the origin power he'd had just yesterday. He felt invincible. When they stepped into the Ling residence, the atmosphere had shifted. The guards didn't just stand at attention, they bowed. The news of him crushing the Cheng brothers had turned the trash into a legend. Ling Han ignored the stares and sprinted for his father's study. Ling Dongxing had promised, reach the element gathering tier, and I'll tell you about your mother. He found his father hunched over a desk, an invitation in his hand. Father, I've returned. Hanner, you're just in time, Ling Dongxing laughed, holding out a card. The Cheng clan is hosting a banquet tonight. They've invited us both. Ling Han scanned the elegant script. They're begging for mercy? They're dying, Ling Dongxing said grimly. Ma Da Jun cut their supply. I paralyzed their gold. They're drowning, and this banquet is either a white flag or a suicide trap. Ling Dongxing looked at his son, his brow furrowing. There was something different about the boy. The air around him was vibrating. Pa. The elder Ling slammed his hand on the desk and surged to his feet, his eyes wide with a manic, joyous fire. Hanner, you actually did it, you've broken through. Ling Han smiled. I have. Good, good. Ling Dongxing's voice cracked. He gripped his hands so tight the bones groaned under the skin. You've done more in a month than I did in a decade. Now, father, Ling Han's voice went low, raw with a hunger he had carried since the moment he woke up in this life. Tell me about my mother. Ling Dongxing's face paled. The joy evaporated, replaced by a bitterness so old and deep it seemed to age him 20 years in an instant. You have the right, the father whispered. I kept this poison in my heart for too long. It's time you knew why we are alone. Ling Han nodded, his jaw set like stone. Whoever they are, he swore silently, whoever tore my family apart. I will find them. And I will show them what a heaven-tier soul in a vengeful body can do. Years ago, I too was considered a genius of this country, Ling Dongxing began, his voice raspy, vibrating with a haunting nostalgia. I was young, arrogant, and hungry for the world. After I broke through to the element-gathering tier, I left this small town behind. 18 years ago, in the suffocating shadows of the dark demon forest, I found your mother. As he spoke, the mask of the steadfast clan head crumbled. A raw, agonizing tenderness bled into his expression. A look reserved only for the ghost of the woman he loved. Her name is Yu Hong Chong. She was beautiful, gentle, a light I didn't deserve. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, but it was quickly devoured by the shadows of his memory. We fought the first time we met. A misunderstanding. But that fire turned into a journey, and that journey turned into a bond that reached the marrow of our bones. When she fell pregnant with you, we tried to come home. That was when the sky fell. That was when I learned she wasn't just a wanderer. She was the great-granddaughter of the third elder of the Winter Moon sect. Ling Han's breath hitched. He knew the weight of that name. The Winter Moon sect didn't just have masters. They had gods. Their sect master and elders were in the spiritual infant tier, the 7th tier of martial arts. To them, a place like Rain Country was nothing more than a mound of dirt to be crushed under a boot. They had already sold her, Ling Dongxing snarled, his eyes turning into pits of black fire. They wanted her to marry a man named Ao Feng. A genius of the sect. A man whose talent was a slap in the face of nature. But he was a dog. A philanderer with 100 concubines and bastards scattered across the world. Your mother fled to escape him, and she found me. But the sect found us. They hunted us like animals. You were barely a babe in arms when her brother, Yu Zhenshan, and that bastard Ao Feng cornered us. I will never forget what he did. He didn't just beat me. He broke my fingers, one by one, screaming for me to betray her. He wanted me to call her a whore. I refused. I would have let him peel the skin from my ribs before I hurt her. Ling Dongxing's voice dropped to a brutal, guttural whisper. Your mother saved us. She put a blade to her own throat and told them she would die right there if they touched us again. They took her. But before they left, Ao Feng reached out and shattered my spirit base. He left me a cripple, a shell of a man. I wanted to storm their gates and die on their spears, but I looked at you. For your sake, I chose a coward's life. I chose to hide in this town and swallow my shame. Ling Han's heart burned. The rage in his soul was a physical weight, cold and heavy. Spiritual infant tier. The 7th tier. He was currently at the 2nd. To a normal man, the gap was an eternity. 200 or 300 years of cultivation. To Ling Han, the Alchemy Emperor with an immortal spirit base, it was a target. And Ao Feng? The man who broke his father's body and stole his mother's life? Dead, Ling Han thought. In my heart, I have already flayed him alive. Hanner, Ling Dongxing warned, sensing the lethal energy radiating from his son. The Winter Moon sect is a mountain. You cannot kick a mountain. Do not be impulsive. If you die, I have nothing left to tell your mother. Ling Han nodded, his expression a mask of cold, calculated murder. I won't be impulsive, father. I'll be inevitable. Good. Then focus, Ling Dongxing said, forcing his voice back to the present. Since you've reached element gathering, you qualify for the Da Yuan tournament. The what? Ling Han searched his memories. Nothing. It's held every 3 years by the king's mansion. Participants must be under 30 and below the gushing spring tier. The reward this year is the dark moongrass. Ling Han's eyes went wide. His mind, filled with 10,000 years of alchemical secrets, screamed in protest. Idiots! He screamed internally. They want to use dark moongrass for a purple origin pill? To help someone reach the gushing spring tier? That's like using a dragon's heart to fuel a kitchen fire. Dark moongrass was the core of the spatial pill. It didn't just help you break through. It expanded the very space of the Dantian. For a man with 5 elemental nuclei like Ling Han, who was already worried about running out of fuel in a fight, this wasn't just a prize, it was a necessity. But the tournament was only 2 months away. He was at the early stage of the first layer. He needed to be stronger, much stronger. I need the inner core of a red-scaled dragon snake, Ling Han murmured. I need to concoct the transcending origin pill. The red-scaled dragon snake was a nightmare, venomous, fast, and lethal. But its core could force a breakthrough in the early stages of element gathering. He had 2 months to become a god slayer. He had a mother to rescue and a father's dignity to reclaim. "Father," Ling Han said, his voice echoing with the authority of the emperor he once was. "Prepare the house. I'm going to the 7 Wind Mountains. And when I come back, I'm taking everything the Dayuan king has to offer." "Father isn't trying to gut your confidence," Hanner, Ling Dongxing said, his voice dropping into a low, grave register that felt like a warning from the edge of a cliff. "But every Dayuan tournament is a slaughterhouse of talent. There will be monsters there. Warriors at the peak of the 9th layer of element gathering. You just step through the door. No matter how much of a freak your talent is, a newborn tiger cannot kill an ancient wolf." Ling Han felt the weight of the words, but his expression remained as cold and sharp as a blade. He understood the hierarchy of power. Every 3 layers was a threshold, a chasm that few could leap. At the first layer, his 5 elements origin nuclei gave him the raw output to crush the middle stage, but the late stage, against a 9th layer veteran who had mastered every nuance of their art, that was a 50-50 gamble with death. "I'm heading to the 7 Wind Mountains," Ling Han said, his voice flat and final. Ling Dongxing's face went pale. The 7 Wind Mountains wasn't a training ground, it was a graveyard. Deep within its heart, things lurked that made spiritual ocean masters turn and run. "I'll stay on the outskirts," Ling Han added, though his eyes betrayed a darker intent. He needed that red-scaled dragon snake. He needed to be a monster before he faced the King of Eternal Night. The sun began to bleed into the horizon. Ling Han bathed, the month of blood and dirt in the wilds washing off him in a dark swirl. He had grown. His physique was sturdier, his presence more predatory. When he tried on his old clothes, the seams groaned under the strain. He ordered new attire, but his gaze drifted to Lu Yutong. "Get her measurements, too," he commanded a servant. The girl who had once been a cold princess of the imperial city was now his attendant, and she was going to this banquet as a statement of power. When she finally emerged from her room, even Ling Han, a man who had seen the beauties of the heaven tier, felt the air leave his lungs. She wore a gown the color of lake water, the silk clinging to her curves like a second skin. Her breasts were full, her waist a slender line that broke into the dangerous, elegant arch of her hips. She had painted her face with a touch of art, turning her icy beauty into something alluring, something that could drive a man to madness. She caught his stare and lifted her chin, a flicker of feminine triumph dancing in her eyes. "Let's go," she said, her voice like velvet. She veiled her face before they stepped out, a secret treasure reserved for Ling Han's eyes alone. As they walked toward the carriages, Ling Han's mind turned to the hunt. Who are the real threats in Dayuan City? Lu Yutong's steps faltered. "The 4th son of the king," she whispered, her voice tight with respect. "Qi Yongyi. They call him the King of Eternal Night. 3 years ago, at the 6th layer, he butchered an 8th layer warrior like he was gutting a fish. Now? He's likely at the 9th layer. He is a wall of steel, Hanner." Ling Han's blood began to simmer. "The King of Eternal Night?" he thought. "I'll show him a darkness he can't imagine." The carriage swayed as they approached the Cheng clan residence. Closely following behind were Ling Zhongquan and his grandson, the vultures of the family, still clinging to their stolen dreams of the academy. "You haven't purged them yet, father?" Ling Han asked, his voice a low snarl. Ling Dongxing's jaw tightened. "The chief butler has deep roots, Hanner. I'm cutting them, but it takes time." "Time is a luxury we don't have," Ling Han muttered. They stepped out onto the red carpet of the Cheng mansion. The air was thick with the scent of incense and hidden daggers. Servants shrieked their arrivals, their voices echoing off the high, beast-like walls of the estate. "Ha ha, brother Ling. I've been waiting." A man with a face as red as dates and a frame built like a siege engine stepped forward. It was Cheng Wen-kun, the head of the Cheng clan. His smile was wide, but his eyes were cold, calculating, and desperate. The banquet wasn't a party, it was a cage, and as Ling Han stepped inside, his hand moved instinctively toward the hilt of his sword. "Brother Cheng." Ling Dongxing's voice rang out, a sharp, artificial smile carved into his face as he raised his hands in a greeting that felt more like a prelude to a duel. "Come, come. You're the guest of honor." Cheng Wen-kun gripped Ling Dongxing's arm with a desperate, crushing enthusiasm. To any outsider, they looked like brothers. To Ling Han, watching from the periphery, they looked like 2 starving wolves circling a single scrap of meat, waiting for the first sign of a bared throat. Ling Han felt a surge of pure disgust. This was the theater of the weak. In his last life, The world knelt at his feet because he held the secrets of life and death in his alembic. He didn't play these games. He didn't have to. Cheng Wen-kun didn't even look at Ling Han. He acted as if the boy who had crippled his sons and gutted his clan's fortune didn't exist. It was a calculated insult, a cold silence that screamed louder than any threat. "Hanner," Ling Dongxing whispered, his eyes scanning the room like a soldier in a minefield. "Don't go too far tonight." "Yes, father," Ling Han replied, his voice a low, dangerous hum. Behind him, Lu Yutong followed like a silent, beautiful shadow, her presence a silent warning to anyone brave enough to look. They reached the main hall, a sea of 100 tables and 1,000 hidden agendas. Ling Han found his seat. 3 young students from Great Cloud Academy were already there. They scrambled to greet him, their faces tight with a newfound, terrifying respect. They had seen him break the Cheng brothers. They knew he was a 16-year-old monster in the 7th layer of body refining. Ling Han gave them a thin, predatory smile. He wasn't there to make friends. Then, the atmosphere curdled. Ling Yun sat down, his face a mask of frozen stone, refusing to meet Ling Han's eyes. Moments later, Cheng Shang swaggered over, his eyes burning with a feverish, toxic light. "Ling Han," Cheng Shang sneered, "you look far too comfortable." Ling Han didn't even stop leaning back. "Hee. Your face seems to have healed well. Does it still sting when you remember begging for your life?" Cheng Zhang's face turned the color of a fresh wound. The humiliation of that day was a rot in his soul. "Enjoy your arrogance while it lasts, trash. Before this night is over, you'll be on the floor, licking my boots for mercy." "Did you forget to take your medicine?" Ling Han chuckled. "Or did you take so much your brain has finally dissolved?" The hall fell silent as Cheng Wen-kun stood, raising his hands. The air turned heavy. Every guest knew the stakes. Was the Cheng clan going to kneel? Was the war over? "I've invited you all here," Cheng Wen-kun began, his voice booming with a sudden, terrifying confidence, "to introduce someone very special." The room went cold. A reception. This wasn't a surrender. This was a counterattack. 100 pairs of eyes flicked to Ling Dongxing, looking for a crack in his armor, but the elder Ling remained a statue of serene indifference. "This is my nephew," Cheng Wen-kun shouted, "Cheng Xiao Yuan. He left us at 13 to serve an elder of the Stone Wolf sect. He has returned." Stone Wolf sect. The name was a thunderclap. They were the butchers of the region, the absolute tyrants who held the life and death of 10 towns in their blood-stained palms. The guests whispered in a frantic, fearful swarm. Cheng Wen-kun hadn't just found a card, he had found an executioner. But that's not all. Cheng Wen-kun's voice reached a fever pitch. "Xiao Yuan has brought a guest. Let us welcome Chen Feng Lai, elder of the Stone Wolf sect." Elder. The word hit like a physical blow. An elder meant the gushing spring tear. A man who could erase an entire clan with a flick of his wrist. An old man in vermilion robes strode into the light, his skin glowing with a strange, unnatural vitality. Behind him, Cheng Xiao Yuan followed like a whipped dog. Chen Feng Lai didn't look at the guests. He didn't look at the food. He sat at the head table with an arrogance so thick it was suffocating. To him, everyone in this room was already dead. They just hadn't stopped breathing yet. Cheng Wen-kun shot a look of pure, venomous triumph at Ling Dongxing. "I have a god at my table. What do you have, Ling?" Cheng Xiao Yuan didn't sit with the masters. He marched to Ling Han's table, his aura flaring. He was in the element-gathering tier, his power raw and unpolished, but lethal. "Young brother Shang," Xiao Yuan said, his voice dripping with mock pity. "I heard some local trash managed a lucky hit you a few days ago?" "I was less skilled that day," Cheng Shang hissed, his eyes locked on Ling Han. "Oh," Xiao Yuan's gaze snapped to Ling Han, cold and sharp as a butcher's knife. "So it was this genius who hurt you?" He leaned across the table, his killing intent flooding the air. "Tell me, boy," Xiao Yuan snarled. "Do you have the courage to bleed? Do you dare to spar with me?" The air in the courtyard was thick with the scent of cheap wine and expensive blood. This wasn't a spar, it was a public execution. Cheng Shang leaned back, his voice dripping with a poisonous arrogance. "I forgot to mention," he sneered, looking around the table at the trembling guests. "This cousin of mine? He broke through to the element-gathering tier a year ago. He's already clawing at the peak of the 1st layer. A true genius, wouldn't you say?" Cheng Xiao Yuan played his role with a sickening, false humility. "Oh, I broke through at 20. I'm just a step ahead of most," he said, but his eyes were fixed on Ling Han like a hawk watching a mouse. The table went dead silent. Element gathering. To the people of Great Cloud Town, that wasn't just a tier. It was a wall of iron. The guests looked at Ling Han with pity. If he refused, he was a coward whose reputation would be ground into the dirt. If he accepted, he was stepping into a meat grinder. With the gushing spring elder watching, Cheng Xiao Yuan could snap Ling Han's neck and call it an accident, and no one would dare breathe a word of protest. They wanted to break him. They wanted to see the genius of the Ling clan crawl. Ling Han felt the five-element origin nuclei in his Dantian hum with a cold, predatory hunger. He looked at the two cousins, and the corners of his lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a smile that promised a nightmare. "All right," Ling Han said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Let's spar for a bit." The courtyard was cleared. 10 meters of cold stone became a stage for murder. Cheng Zhang's heart leapt with a savage elation. "Die, you brat, just die." "You really are a fool," Cheng Xiao Yuan hissed, his voice dropping so low it was barely a rasp. "I am going to slaughter you in front of your father." "You're dreaming," Ling Han spat. "Then die," Xiao Yuan lunged. He didn't use a technique. He didn't think he needed to. He threw a raw, crushing fist powered by the peak of the first layer of element gathering, fully intending to shatter Ling Han's arm and chest in one go. Ling Han didn't flinch. He didn't retreat. He met that fist with his own. K-boom! The collision sent a shockwave screaming through the courtyard. The guests standing too close were blown backward, chairs flipping, plates shattering against the stone. But in the center of the dust, two figures remained locked, fist against fist, bone against bone. The silence that followed was deafening. The guests stared, food falling from their open mouths. Ling Han hadn't been blown away. He hadn't even buckled. He was standing his ground, his gaze level and freezing. Cheng Xiao Yuan's face twisted from arrogance to a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. "Element, gathering tier? You're not the only one who can step through that door," Ling Han whispered. The crowd exploded in a roar of disbelief. 16. He was 16. Cheng Xiao Yuan was a genius for doing it at 20. But Ling Han had just rewritten the laws of possibility. Up at the host table, Cheng Wen-kun's face turned the color of a bruise. His killing intent was so thick it was a physical weight. He's 16. He's already more dangerous than his father ever was. If he lives through tonight, the Cheng clan is finished. Ling Dongxing sat back, his heart swelling with a fierce, brutal pride. "Just so," he remarked to Wen-kun, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "He still can't compare to your Xiao Yuan, who's had a whole year to practice, right?" In the courtyard, Cheng Xiao Yuan's mind was racing. A month ago he was trash. Now he's a master. He has a treasure. He has an opportunity. And it belongs to me. He didn't care about the honor of the duel anymore. He wanted Ling Han's secrets. He opened his hands, his fingers hooking like claws. Earth-shaking palm. It was a yellow-grade high-level technique, something far beyond the reach of a backwater town. The air around his hands began to vibrate with a heavy, mountain-crushing pressure. He had used this palm to kill men twice his size. He truly believed that with one strike, he would turn Ling Han's internal organs into mush. "Prepare yourself, brat," Xiao Yuan roared. "This is the power of the Stone Wolf sect." The air in the courtyard didn't just turn cold, it turned lethal. Ling Han raised his fists, and the space around him seemed to warp as a predatory, suffocating aura erupted from his marrow. Dashing Panther Fist. In his previous life, this was a technique he'd discarded long before reaching the gushing spring tier, but an emperor's memory is eternal. He hadn't touched this style in 10,000 years, but as his muscles coiled, the ancient instincts of a heaven-tier master surged back into his veins. He wasn't just a boy fighting a cousin. He was a panther, starving, silent, and focused entirely on the kill. Pung! 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 The collision of bone and spirit echoed like cannon fire. The guests scrambled back, their faces pale. "What is that style?" someone hissed. "The Ling clan doesn't have a fist technique like that." Cheng Xiao Yuan's mind was screaming. He was using a high-level manual from the Stone Wolf sect, a gift from the gods themselves. How is this backwater trash matching him blow for blow? Worse, with every exchange, Ling Han's punches were getting faster, heavier, more precise. It was as if he were learning how to kill in real time. He wasn't wrong. Ling Han was shaking off the rust of 10,000 years. A yellow-grade high-level technique should double a man's strength, but its true power lay in the soul of the user. Xiao Yuan could only grasp 80% of his palm's potential. Ling Han? He was already at 90, and he was climbing toward a perfect, terrifying 100. The power of the five elements' origin nuclei roared. Even at the first layer of element gathering, Ling Han's raw output was a tidal wave. Genius! The crowd roared. The trash of the Ling clan. He's been hiding this? He's a monster. Ling Han didn't hear them. He didn't care about their shock. He was in the zone of the hunt. His feet moved in the exiting cloud step, his form blurring into a dozen afterimages. To the body-refining cultivators in the crowd, he was a ghost. To Cheng Xiaoyuan, he was a nightmare. Pung! Pung! Fists slammed into Xiaoyuan's ribs and shoulders. The genius of the Stone Wolf sect was sobbing from the sheer, agonizing pain. Ling Han had no intention of mercy. This boy had planned to murder him to bait his father into a death trap. Since Xiaoyuan wanted a massacre, Ling Han would provide one. Suddenly, a silver flash ignited at the edge of Ling Han's knuckles. Fist chi. The crowd gasped as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Is that chi? He's formed fist chi. To form chi meant you were no longer just a martial artist. You were a ruler among them. It was a level of mastery that most men didn't reach in a century, yet here it was, dripping from the fingers of a 16-year-old. Every graze of his fist now tore through Xiaoyuan's skin like a serrated blade. Blood sprayed across the stones. Lu Yutong watched with wide, trembling eyes. She knew he had sword chi. Now fist chi? What kind of monster did I follow? She wondered. Ling Han's eyes narrowed. The killing intent in his soul reached its peak. He knew the gushing spring elder, Chen Feng Lai, was watching like a hawk. To kill Xiaoyuan, he couldn't just win. He had to delete him in a single, instantaneous strike before the old man could move. He sensed the opening. He felt the exact moment Xiaoyuan's balance faltered. No! Xiaoyuan shrieked, seeing the reaper in Ling Han's eyes. Pung! The final fist didn't just hit, it detonated. It drove through Xiaoyuan's defense and buried itself in his chest. Xiaoyuan stood frozen for a heartbeat, staring blankly at Ling Han. Then, his knees buckled. He hit the dirt with a heavy, wet thud. His heart had been pulverized. He was dead before his head hit the ground. How dare you, brat! Boom! Chen Feng Lai exploded from his seat, his gushing spring aura crashing down on the hall like a falling moon. His eyes were twin pits of volcanic rage. A disciple of the Stone Wolf sect, even one in name only, had been slaughtered like a dog by a country nobody. The insult was a stain that could only be washed away in Ling Han's blood. The elder's killing intent flooded the courtyard, suffocating every person present. He took a step forward, ready to turn Ling Han into a red smear. Ling Han didn't flinch. He didn't even drop his stance. He turned his head slowly, locking eyes with the gushing spring master. His voice was a low, brutal growl that carried the weight of 1,000 years of slaughter. Old man, Ling Han spat, if you don't want to die today, I advise you to keep those filthy thoughts to yourself. The hall went into a deathly silence. Every guest had the same thought. Ling Han has lost his mind. He just threatened a god. The silence that followed Ling Han's threat wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum, sucking the life out of every person in the hall. He had slaughtered a disciple of the Stone Wolf sect, and now he was barking orders at a gushing spring god. To the observers, Ling Han was a dead man walking. To challenge the Stone Wolf sect was to challenge the very gravity of their world. Chen Feng Lai stood frozen for a heartbeat, his mind reeling from the sheer, icy weight of Ling Han's gaze. It wasn't the look of a 16-year-old boy. It was the vast, terrifying stare of a sovereign who had watched empires crumble. But the elder's pride roared back. He began to laugh, a dark, jagged sound. And how, exactly, do you plan to kill me, brat? I don't need to do a thing, Ling Han said, his voice as steady as a funeral bell. Within 5 days. The poison in your meridians will do it for me. Tell me, 10 days ago, when you tried to force the 4th layer, how did that work out for you? Chen Feng Lai's laughter died in his throat. His face went ashen. It was a secret he hadn't told a soul. The moment his origin power had turned into a rampaging beast, nearly tearing his veins apart. How? How did you? Press the spot 3 inches below your left ribs, Ling Han commanded. Chen Feng Lai wanted to scream. Preposterous. But his hand moved as if possessed. He pressed. Arg! A sharp, agonizing spasm ripped through his chest, making the gushing spring master buckle. Now, Ling Han's voice grew even colder, half an inch to the right of your 7th spinal bone. Chen Feng Lai touched the spot and felt a jolt of ice-cold fire. Cold sweat erupted across his forehead. He looked at Ling Han not with rage, but with the desperate, wide-eyed terror of a man looking at his only lifeline. You're in a state of cultivation madness, Ling Han said, a thin, ruthless smile playing on his lips. I can save you. Or I can watch you rot. I will forgive your sin, Chen Feng Lai choked out. Save me, and the boy's death is forgotten. Elder Chen, Cheng Wen Kun screamed, his voice cracking with betrayal. He killed my nephew, you can't just. Shut up. Chen Feng Lai's head snapped toward Wen Kun, his eyes glowing with a murderous, feral light. Is your nephew's corpse worth more than my life? Speak again, and I'll send you to join him. Cheng Wen Kun recoiled, the silence of the room pressing in on him. He had invited a tiger to protect him, only to watch the tiger turn and bare its fangs at his own throat. Ling Han tisked tsked, shaking his head. Is a gushing spring life worth so little? Just a forgiveness? You'll have to do better than that, elder. The ninth elder of the Stone Wolf sect swallowed his pride like a mouthful of broken glass. He bowed. He actually bowed. What are your commands, young Master Han? The hall gasped. Young Master Han. The hierarchy of Grey Cloud Town didn't just break, it shattered. This man, Ling Han pointed a lazy finger at Cheng Wen Kun, annoys me, thrash him. Cheng Wen Kun's world turned green. He had spent his life fighting Ling Dongxing for every scrap of power, only to be offered up as a punching bag by his own ally. Pa. Pa. The sounds of the slaps echoed like whip cracks. Chen Feng Lai didn't hold back. He poured his frustration into Cheng Wen Kun's face, sending teeth and blood spraying onto the red carpet. The guests watched in horrific fascination as the head of the Cheng clan was humiliated in his own home. Enough, Ling Han said. He scribbled a formula on a scrap of paper. This will suppress the rot for 6 months. You won't die, but you won't be cured either. We'll see how you behave before I give you the rest. Chen Feng Lai took the paper as if it were made of gold. Thank you, young Master Han. The carriage ride home was filled with the booming, cathartic laughter of Ling Dongxing. In 30 years, I have never seen that snake Wen Kun swallow his own blood like that. Hanner, you are a miracle. Ling Han sat in the shadows, his expression unreadable. To his father, this was a victory of politics. To Ling Han, it was just a Tuesday. He had a mother to save and a world to conquer. A local clan feud was beneath his notice. One more month, Ling Dongxing declared, his eyes bright with victory. The Qing clan is a ghost. By the new year, the Ling clan will be the only power left in this town. But Ling Han's gaze was already fixed on the dark, jagged peaks of the Seven Wind Mountains. The tides in Grey Cloud Town had turned, and they were stained with the blood of the fallen. The Ling clan rose like a dark sun, their influence suffocating the region, while the Qing clan withered away, a broken beast waiting for the final blow. Morale was a rotted corpse in their halls. Everyone knew why. Ling Dongxing had a son who was no longer a joke, but a monster. The same clans that had laughed at the trash now crawled at the Ling clan's gates, begging to marry off their daughters to Ling Han. The Shen clan, meanwhile, had become the laughingstock of the town. They had held a god in their hands and thrown him into the mud. Now, they were left with nothing but the bitter taste of regret. But the peace was a thin veil. Chen Feng Lai was gone, but a new predator had entered the town. Ma Lang. A wolf from the Stone Wolf sect, leading a law enforcement team that smelled of iron and death. They weren't here for tea, they were hunting a murderer. When Ling Han entered the main hall, he saw him, the man in white. Ma Lang was 24, with the raw, surging power of the 6th layer of element-gathering tier. Beside him, the local geniuses, like Cheng Shang, were nothing but insects. His smile was a jagged scar of falsehood, a mask of civility that couldn't hide the rot underneath. Outside, a line of black-clad enforcers stood like statues of shadow. Each was in the element-gathering tier. This was the crushing weight of the Stone Wolf sect. Ling clan head, Ma Lang drawled, his voice a low, dangerous scrape. Within the last month, has any member of your bloodline entered the Balance Mountain? Ling Dongxing's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He knew Ling Han had been there. But he had spent decades hiding his own scars. He didn't blink. As far as I know, he lied, his voice like stone, none of my people have stepped near that place. Ma Lang didn't argue. He just sat there, eyes closed, letting the silence scream. Ling Dongxing signaled for a wooden box. 2,000 coins, a fortune, slipped into Ma Lang's hands. The imperial envoy opened it, counted it, and finally, a cold, hungry smile touched his lips. The tribute had been accepted. I am under the 7th Elder's command, Ma Lang said, standing up with the arrogance of a king. A murderer is loose. If you find anyone who was near that mountain, inform me. I'll be staying a few days. Of course, Ling Dongxing replied, rising to see him out. Young Master Ma. The voice was a jagged shard of glass. Ling Zhongquan. The old traitor stepped forward, a venomous grin curling his lips. He didn't care about the clan. He didn't care about the future. He only cared about the throne he hadn't won. I just remembered, Ling Zhongquan hissed. There is one. Ling Han. He was gone for a month. Perhaps. He wandered to Balance Mountain. The hall froze. The Ling elders cursed the old man in their hearts. To betray your own blood to a sect executioner. It was a sin beyond redemption. Ling Dongxing's rage was a white-hot furnace, but he kept his mask on. Ma Lang's eyes snapped to Ling Dongxing. Is this true, clanhead? My son went on a training trip, Ling Dongxing said, his voice dangerously low, but he was nowhere near that mountain. Then where? Ma Lang narrowed his eyes, his killing intent flickering like a candle in a dark room. The Seven Wind Mountains, Ling Han said, stepping out from the shadows. Ma Lang turned. His gaze was a physical weight, crushing and cold. So, you're Ling Han. I am, Ling Han replied, meeting the predator's eyes with a stare that had seen the end of worlds. The air in the room turned to ice. Ma Lang stared at the boy for what felt like an eternity, the tension pulling tight enough to snap bone. Then, he laughed. A loud, jarring sound that lacked any warmth. He walked over and slammed a hand onto Ling Han's shoulder, a friendly gesture that felt like a death sentence. Don't be so nervous, boy. We're just asking questions. I have to visit the Cheng clan. But I'll be back. I think you and I have a lot to talk about. I look forward to it, Ling Han said, his voice flat and brutal. Ma Lang turned on his heel and strode out, his black-clad shadows following like a funeral procession. Only when the door slammed shut did the elders breathe. Their robes were soaked in cold sweat. That man. Someone whispered, he's a poisonous snake. No, Ling Han corrected, looking at the door with eyes of fire. He's just a snake. And snakes are very easy to decapitate. The moment Ma Lang stepped out of the Ling residence, the fake, oily smile vanished. His eyes turned into slits of predatory hunger. 16, he hissed to the shadows. 16 years old and already in the element-gathering tier. In a gutter like Grey Cloud Town? Impossible. He wasn't a fool. He knew that a piece of trash with a 5 elements disarray spirit base didn't just erupt into a genius overnight. Ling Han was hiding something. A divine fruit, an ancient manual, or a secret treasure that defied the natural order. Ma Lang's heart hammered against his ribs. He was a top disciple of the Stone Wolf sect, but at his current rate, he'd be 40 before he touched the gushing spring tier. But with Ling Han's treasure, he could be a god in a year. I have to be subtle, Ma Lang whispered, his mind spinning like a web of spiders. If I push the Ling clan too hard, they might destroy it. If I make too much noise, the sect elders will swoop in and take it for themselves. No. This must be a silent harvest. He sent a letter into the night, summoned by the promise of blood and gold. His target. Yu Zheng, the little poison lord. A man known as Shadowless Poisonous Hands. The plan was simple and brutal. Have Yu Zheng poison Ling Han. Extract the treasure. Execute Yu Zheng as a scapegoat for the murder of Hang Zan, and then slaughter every living soul in the Ling clan to bury the truth forever. For a month, Ma Lang played the role of a devoted friend. He brought wine. He laughed. He acted like he and Ling Han were brothers of the soul. Meanwhile, he bled the other clans dry, extorting every coin he could while he waited for his poisoner to arrive. Inside his room, Ling Han was oblivious, or so it seemed. He was focused on the furnace of his own body. He had reached the absolute peak of the first layer of element gathering. His 5 elements origin nuclei were spinning so fast they threatened to tear his dantian apart, reaching a perfect, lethal balance. My power is already equal to a 5th layer master, Ling Han mused, a cold glint in his eyes. He had spent the month preparing, concocting high-grade return origin pills and specialized antidotes for the red-scaled dragon snake. A knock came at the door. Lu Yu Tong stepped in, her face a mask of cold disdain. Ma Lang is here again. His patience is dead, Ling Han said, standing up. He's tired of sniffing around for my secrets. It's time for him to show his hand. They entered the main hall. Ling Dongxing was there, unsuspecting. Ling Zhongquan and his grandson stood in the corner, their faces twisted into sycophantic, oily grins. Beside Ma Lang sat a new figure. A young man in black who looked like a walking corpse, eyes hollow and skin the color of ash. Brother Ling. Ma Lang stood, his eyes roaming over Lu Yutong's body with a heat that was practically obscene. I'll take the treasure first, he thought, and then I'll take the girl. I've been well, Ling Han replied, his voice flat. Ling Dongxing signaled for tea. Ma Lang was all smiles, spinning tales of the Stone Wolf sect, inviting Ling Han to visit. It was a picture of perfect hospitality. Ling Han reached for his cup. He lifted the lid, and the steam hit his nose. In an instant, the world slowed down. His alchemist's instincts, honed over 10,000 years, screamed a single word. Poison. It was faint, odorless to a normal man. But to a grandmaster alchemist, it was a siren blaring in a silent room. He glanced at his father, who was already raising his cup to his lips. Pa. Ling Han's hand blurred. A wave of origin power erupted from his palm, a controlled tremor that shattered the cup in Ling Dongxing's hand before a single drop could touch his tongue. Tea and porcelain exploded across the floor. Hanner. Ling Dongxing surged to his feet, shocked and confused. Don't drink it, Ling Han growled, his gaze locking onto the corpse in black and then shifting to Ma Lang. The tea is laced with death. What? Ling Dongxing's eyes burned with a sudden, lethal fire. He didn't question his son. He turned his head slowly toward Ling Zhongquan, his voice a low, vibrating snarl of betrayal. You would poison your own blood? But Ling Han kept his eyes on the visitors. The friendship was over. The masks were off. The air in the room didn't just turn cold, it turned into a tomb. Ling Dongxing. You dare? Ling Zhongquan shrieked, his voice cracking like dry parchment. He pointed a trembling finger at the clan head, his face a sickly shade of green. To accuse me of poisoning the Stone Wolf sect? I would be executed 100 times over. You're trying to frame me? For the first time in his life of low-level schemes, the old fox felt the cold sweat of being a victim of his own game. He had done many vile things, but even he wasn't suicidal enough to poison an imperial envoy. Ling Dongxing's gaze was a furnace of cold fury. Because of our blood, I have tolerated your rot, Ling Zhongquan. But this, to endanger the entire clan by poisoning our guests? You've gone too far? It's not him, Ling Han interrupted, his voice cutting through the tension like a guillotine blade. Not him? The hall went silent. Ling Zhongquan looked at Ling Han as if he'd grown a second head. Ling Han let out a dark, mocking chuckle. This pair of trash? They don't have the mental capacity or the skill to concoct a poison this refined. They're too incompetent to be this dangerous. Ling Zhongquan and his grandson stood frozen, paralyzed by a mix of lethal offense and sudden, desperate relief. To be called trash was an insult, but in this room, it was their only ticket to staying alive. Then who? Ling Dongxing growled. Ling Han turned his gaze slowly toward Ma Lang. A brutal, knowing smile touched his lips. Brother Ma, the act is getting stale. Don't you want to explain why you poisoned the well of the family that welcomed you? Explain? Ma Lang's face was a mask of perfect, wide-eyed confusion. Ling Han, I treated you as a brother. To slander me like this. What is your game? Your water, your leaves, your servants, I haven't touched them. He's right. Ling Zhongquan screamed, sensing a chance to crawl back into favor. Ling Han, to insult the sect like this is a death sentence for us all. Ma Lang's eyes suddenly turned into cold pits of obsidian. He looked at Ling Zhongquan and said, Chief Butler, I suspect these two have murdered our brother, Hangs On. Will you help me bring them to justice? I am at your command, young Master Ma, the old traitor barked, his eyes gleaming with the hope of stepping over his brother's corpse to the throne. Good. Take the father. I'll break the boy. Ma Lang nodded to the corpse-like youth in black beside him. Pooh. The youth, Yu Zheng, shattered a jade bottle against the stone floor. A thick, oily black cloud erupted, rolling through the hall like a living shadow. Ha 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 ha. Ma Lang's face finally twisted into its true, demonic shape. I didn't think you'd be so sharp, Ling Han. Yes, I poisoned your well. But I have plan B. This is origin-shattering powder. Breathe it in, and your origin power will turn to lead. Your bones will turn to glass. You won't even have the strength to beg. Ling Dongxing slammed his mouth shut, holding his breath, but Ling Zhongquan was already lunging at him, desperate to pin him down in the cloud. Ling Han reached into his sleeve and pulled out a bottle. He swallowed a pill and tossed another to Lu Yu Tong. Father, catch. He threw a third to Ling Dongxing. The antidote. Eat it and breathe. Let the snake watch his plan fail. Ma Lang didn't even move to intercept. He watched with a sneer of pure contempt. Antidote, he thought. You think a backwater brat has a key for the little poison lord's lock? Go ahead. Eat it. Open your mouth and breathe your death. Ling Dongxing caught the pill and swallowed it without a heartbeat of hesitation. He opened his lungs and drew in a deep breath of the black mist. Yu Zheng, the little poison lord, watched with a predatory smirk. His powder didn't just stall origin power. It was a caustic acid that melted internal organs from the inside out. He waited for the blood to spray from Ling Dongxing's nose. He waited for the collapse. But it didn't come. Ling Dongxing's eyes snapped open, glowing with a renewed, lethal light. His aura didn't fade, it surged. Ma Lang's smile faltered. Why aren't they falling? Suddenly, a horrific, gurgling scream tore through the hall.
Arg! Help me! Ling Zhongquan fell to the floor, his body arching in a grotesque, bone-snapping spasm. Beside him, Ling Muyun collapsed, his skin turning a bruised, necrotic purple. They hadn't taken the pill. They had breathed in the very poison they thought would save their ambitions.
You fools, Ling Han said, his voice echoing with a cold, brutal authority. You sold your clan for a seat on a throne made of ash. Now, burn in it. He looked at Ma Lang, his hand moving toward his hilt. The time for talking was over. You wanted my secret, Ma Lang? I'll show it to you. It's called a painful death. An antidote. Ling Zhongquan's voice was a jagged rasp of agony. The origin-shattering powder was no longer just stalling his power. It was a swarm of invisible piranhas, devouring his internal organs. He clawed at the stone floor, his fingernails snapping, leaving bloody streaks behind. Beside him, Ling Muyun couldn't even scream. A horrific KKK sound bubbled from his throat as cold sweat washed over his necrotic skin. They were rotting alive, and nobody cared. Ma Lang and Yu Zheng stood frozen, their eyes fixed on Ling Han with a mixture of disbelief and primal fear. That pill. It shouldn't exist. No backwater brat should have a key to a poison lord's master lock. You reap what you sow, Ling Han spat, his voice devoid of a single shred of mercy. He didn't even look at the dying traitors. He looked at the predators. Father, you take the poison lord. This greedy dog belongs to me. Are you sure? Ling Dongxing's voice was thick with worry. Ma Lang was a sixth-layer veteran. Ling Han was a newborn in this tier. Trust me, father, Ling Han said, a cold, confident light igniting in his eyes. Enforcers, Ma Lang roared, his voice cracking with desperation. Kill them, execute everyone except the brat and the woman, now.
More than 10 black-clad killers flooded the hall, their blades singing as they drew. Ling Dongxing let out a feral hiss. He was a ninth-layer master, a wounded lion finally baring its teeth. He didn't wait, he became a whirlwind of iron and fury, crashing into the enforcers with the weight of decades of suppressed rage.
Ma Lang didn't join them. He began to circle Ling Han like a vulture. I see it now, he whispered, his eyes gleaming with a sickening, wet greed. An ancient treasure trove. Pills for cultivation, universal antidotes. You found a god's grave, didn't you? Well, you're just a delivery boy, it's all mine now? The only thing you'll receive, Ling Han growled, is a grave of your own. Die. Ma Lang lunged. Ling Han's hand blurred, ding. The longsword cleared the scabbard, and a silver arc of sword chi screamed through the air. Sword chi? Ma Lang stumbled back, his heart nearly stopping. You're trash. How did you form chi? His shock instantly curdled back into greed. The treasure must be even greater than he imagined. Fine. You're not the only one. He drew a bent saber, and a blood-red light ignited along the edge. Saber chi. I'll show you the difference between a genius and a lucky peasant. You talk too much, Ling Han said, his voice flat and brutal. Regret those words in hell. Ma Lang charged. Shoo! Shoo! The saber danced, two crimson arcs cutting through the air with the crushing weight of the sixth layer. Lu Yutong's knuckles turned white. Her heart was in her throat. The gap was 5 layers, a chasm that should have been impossible to cross. She wanted to scream, to jump in, to take the blow for him. Ling Han didn't move until the saber was inches from his throat, then, his aura exploded. 2 flashes of sword chi erupted from his blade. 2 flashes. Ma Lang's eyes almost burst from their sockets. But he didn't stop. He banked on his raw power, his 6th-layer cultivation, to crush Ling Han's slender blade. Ting! Steel met steel in a spray of sparks. The saber chi and 1 sword chi cancelled out in a violent hiss of energy. But the second flash of sword chi didn't stop. It tore through Ma Lang's defense like a hot needle through silk. Pooh! Pooh! Blood erupted from Ma Lang's chest. He staggered back, gasping, his face a mask of horror. How? How do you have this much power? You're at the 1st layer, your strike. It felt like the 5th. Because I am a genius, Ling Han said, his sword moving in a relentless, flickering blur. Damn you! Ma Lang's sanity snapped. He had been the golden boy of the Stone Wolf sect. And now this trash was wearing the title of genius like a crown. It's mine, everything is mine. He raised his saber, his eyes turning a frenzied, bloodshot red. Scarlet trained kill. The air turned thick with the smell of iron. This was a high-level yellow-grade secret, a move reserved for the elite of the sect. The saber glowed a sickening crimson, striking from two directions at once, a pincer of death. Ling Han didn't even blink. He unleashed the shocking electricity sword arts. Ting, ting, ting. The blades clashed in a staccato of death. Every time the saber hit the sword, Ling Han's extra flash of sword chi found a new home in Ma Lang's flesh. Wounds began to open across his arms, his legs, his torso. He was being dismantled, piece by piece. Ma Lang felt the cold touch of mortality. He realized he wasn't winning, he was being hunted. Yu Zheng, he shrieked, his voice trembling with terror. Help me, kill him. An antidote. Ling Zhongquan clawed at his chest, his voice a bubbling moan of agony. The origin-shattering powder was liquefying his insides, turning his lungs into a searing furnace. He looked at Ling Han, then at Ma Lang, his eyes bulging with the realization that he was a pawn being discarded in the dirt. Beside him, Ling Mu-yun was beyond speech. A horrific, wet, KKK sound vibrated in his throat as his body jerked in rhythmic, bone-snapping spasms. Ma Lang and Yu Zheng ignored the dying traitors. Their eyes were locked on Ling Han with a feverish, toxic curiosity. How could a 16-year-old boy possess a universal key to the Poison Lord's most lethal locks? You reap what you sow, Ling Han spat, his voice like the grinding of tombstone granite. He didn't spare the traitors a second glance. He looked at the predators. Father, take the Poison Lord. This greedy dog belongs to me. Are you sure? Ling Dongxing's voice was thick with dread. Ma Lang was a sixth-layer veteran. Ling Han was barely a fledgling in this tier. Trust me, father. Ling Han's smile was cold, sharp, and utterly final. Enforcers, Ma Lang shrieked, his composure shattering into a jagged mess of panic. Kill them, execute everyone except the boy and the woman, now. Black-clad killers flooded the hall like a rising tide of shadow. Ling Dongxing let out a primal, guttural roar. He was a ninth-layer lion finally unleashed. He tore into the enforcers, his strikes shattering bone and steel alike, a whirlwind of desperate, protective fury. Ma Lang circled Ling Han, his eyes glowing with a sickening, wet greed. I see it now. An ancient treasure trove. Pills that defy nature, antidotes that cure the incurable. You're just a lucky rat, Ling Han. But now, everything you have is mine. The only thing you'll have, Ling Han growled, is a shallow grave. Die. Ma Lang lunged, but Yu Zheng, the Poison Lord, lingered back, his hollow eyes scanning Ling Han. Helping you deal with this brat wasn't part of the deal, Ma Lang. He has a treasure trove, you fool, Ma Lang screamed. Split it equally, think of the power, we could rule the sect. Yu Zheng's breathing turned harsh. He pulled two daggers from his back, their blades coated in a viscous, emerald light. He didn't just want the treasure, he was already planning to slit Ma Lang's throat the moment they had it. Yu Tong, Ling Han said casually, as if ordering tea, end him. Understood. Shoo. Lu Yu Tong moved like a streak of lightning, a descending deity of ice and death. She was too fast for the human eye to track. In a heartbeat, she was behind Yu Zheng. She caught his wrist, redirecting his own poisoned dagger with a strength that felt like iron. Pooh! Blood sprayed in a hot, dark arc. Yu Zheng stumbled back, his hands clutching a throat that had been sliced open by his own venom. He reached frantically into his sleeve for an antidote, his face turning a bruised, necrotic black. But his fingers failed him. He collapsed, his eyes wide and lifeless, staring at the ceiling in a silent scream of disbelief. Ma Lang's heart nearly stopped. A fourth-layer master, killed in a single breath? Who is this woman? Still distracted? Ling Han's voice was a whisper in his ear. Ma Lang parried in a blind panic, the shockwave of Ling Han's strike sending him reeling 7 steps back. His chest was already a map of shallow, bleeding gashes. Let me see you off, Ling Han roared. He lunged, his sword becoming a blur of blinding white light. Shocking electricity sword arts. Flash strike. Ma Lang raised his saber, but he was parrying a ghost. The sword bypassed his steel and buried itself deep into his chest. Boom! The origin power within the blade detonated, obliterating Ma Lang's heart from the inside out. He stood there, skewered, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He stared at Ling Han. a silent question in his dying eyes. How did you see through me? After such a long battle, Ling Han said, withdrawing the blade with a sickening squelch, did you think your clumsy moves could still hide from me? Ma Lang fell. He died with a curse in his soul and the bitter taste of failure on his tongue. The hall fell into a heavy, suffocating silence, broken only by the final, wet gasps of Ling Zhongquan and his grandson. The traitors died in the very poison they had welcomed into their home, their eyes fixed in a permanent stare of impotent rage. Hanner, you and Yu Tong must go. Now? Ling Dongxing's voice was trembling. He had won the battle, but the weight of the Stone Wolf sect was already pressing down on his shoulders. I'll stay. I'll die with the clan, but you are our hope. Run. Ling Han wiped his blade, his expression eerily calm. No one is running, father. We have Chen Feng Lai. For the sake of his own life, he will bury this mess. 3 days later, the message came back from the Stone Wolf sect. Chen Feng Lai had done the impossible. Whether through bribery, lies, or blackmail, the deaths of Ma Lang and his team had been officially resolved. The threat was gone. But Ling Han wasn't satisfied. He looked toward the jagged, snow-capped peaks of the Seven Wind Mountains. I need more power, he whispered to the wind. The Dayuan tournament is coming. I will not just compete, I will dominate.
The Seven Wind Mountains loomed over the horizon like the jagged, broken teeth of a titan. 1,000 miles of raw, primitive wilderness where the air tasted of pine needles and ancient blood. Here, the map was written in bone. People didn't just come here to train, they came here to gamble their lives against the fangs of demonic beasts and the crushing weight of the unknown. But as Ling Han and Lu Yutong stepped into the shadows of the canopy, they both knew the truth. The beasts were honest, they killed because they were hungry. It was the humans who were the real monsters. More than half the corpses rotting in these ravines weren't put there by claws, but by cold steel and betrayal. Yellow Bridge Town had been their last taste of civilization. They had left their horses at a roadside inn with a simple, brutal contract: if we aren't back in a month, sell the animals. They didn't need the weight of the world on their backs. They only needed their blades and the cold fire in their veins. For 5 days, they scoured the limestone cliffs, searching for the legendary rock cave. They found damp holes, bat-infested pits, and empty shadows, nothing but disappointment. If it were easy, Ling Han muttered, his eyes scanning the ridgeline, someone would have already claimed the prize. Suddenly, he froze. His ears, honed by 1,000 years of combat memory, picked up the rhythmic, metallic clang of a desperate struggle. Curiosity killed the cat, he whispered, a dark glint in his eyes. But it also leads to the loot. Let's go. They moved like ghosts through the underbrush, arriving at the edge of a bubbling brook. In the clearing, blood was already staining the moss. The world really is a tiny place, Ling Han said, shaking his head. He recognized them. Lu Dong, Li Hao, Zhu Shuiyi, the survivors of the Balance Mountain mess. They had grown, the green spiritual fruits had pushed 3 of them into the element-gathering tier. But they were drowning. They were 3 against 4, facing a band of mountain-hardened thugs who fought with a savage, practiced cruelty. Li Hao was the anchor. He swung his saber with the desperation of a cornered wolf, his breath coming in ragged, bloody gasps. 2 deep gashes opened on his chest and back, painting his robes a vivid, horrific red. His eyes began to turn a manic, glazed crimson. Something was burning inside him, a fuse nearing a powder keg. What is it? Lu Yutong whispered, her hand resting on her hilt. To her, this was a petty squabble of weaklings. Look at him, Ling Han pointed at Li Hao. That boy has potential. He's standing on the precipice. Precipice of what? Saber Qi. Lu Yutong's breath hitched. To form Qi was to transcend the physical. It was a feat of spirit that many master martial artists died without ever achieving. She had lived a life of icy discipline, never feeling the raw, jagged peaks of emotion required to ignite such a spark. She felt a pang of envy, sharp as a needle. Don't worry, Ling Han said, sensing her frustration. With my guidance, forming sword Qi will be like breathing. The only real challenges are the ray and the heart. Lu Yutong nearly rolled her eyes. Not difficult. In the entire Rain country, men would kill their own kin for a sniff of Qi. Only 7 in her elite clan had mastered it. But she looked at Ling Han and remembered the 4 flashes of sword Qi he unleashed like it was nothing. To him, the world was a very different place. Are we just going to watch them die? She asked. No, Ling Han said, his voice cold and analytical. We are going to watch him evolve. If he doesn't find it now, under the shadow of the Reaper, he might not find it for another decade. Let the pressure build. He remembered his own first life, how he had been coddled, his tears bought with pills and safety. It wasn't until he stepped into the true death traps of the world that he became a warrior. Die. The thugs roared, closing in for the final kill. Li Hao let out a sound that wasn't human, a raw, guttural howl of absolute defiance. He swung his saber in a wide, desperate arc. Shua. The air didn't just ripple, it screamed. A silver flash ignited along the edge of his blade, trailing a second, ethereal arc that followed the steel. He did it, Ling Han whispered. Pooh. The saber chi tore through the lead thug's shoulder, spraying blood onto the white stones of the brook. The enemies scrambled back, their eyes wide with terror. They had expected a sheep, and they had found a butcher. Dash dash dash. Good. The shout from Lu Dong and the others was a raw, desperate roar of hope, but it died in their throats as they saw Li Hao stagger. His origin power was a dry well. That last strike, that miraculous flash of saber chi, had been the final flicker of a dying candle, fueled by nothing but the terrifying thought of seeing Zhu Shuiyi harmed. Now, his arm hung limp, his fingers barely clutching the hilt of his weapon. Boss, this brat found his chi. One of the bandits shrieked, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and murder. We can't let him walk out of these mountains. The boss, a brutal giant with a scarred brow and 2 missing fingers, spat a glob of bloody phlegm onto the moss. Kill him. He's too dangerous to keep as a slave. We'll just squeeze the other 4 cash cows, harder to make up for the loss. Hee, maybe his head is worth a few coins at the black market. The bandits cackled, their killing intent thick enough to choke the air. They saw Li Hao as a broken tool, nothing more. Run. Li Hao gasped, his eyes bloodshot and unfocused, yet his gaze remained locked on his friends. I'll hold them, just run. Tisk, 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 the power of love really is a beautiful, bloody thing, a voice drifted from the shadows, light and mocking. Lu Yutong rolled her eyes, her hand resting on her hilt. Are you done playing spectator? They're about to be butchered. Ling Han didn't answer. He gave a sharp, piercing whistle and leapt from the brush, landing with the grace of a panther in the center of the clearing. Ling Han. Lu Dong cried out. For a second, joy flared in his chest, only to be instantly crushed by the weight of reality. 2 months ago, Ling Han was a 7th-layer body refining practitioner. In the world of martial arts, 2 months was a heartbeat. Even if he had progressed, he was still a sheep walking into a den of wolves. Ling Han sighed, shaking his head at their disappointed faces. The way you all look at me, it's truly wounding to my pride. Who the hell are you, brat? The boss with the missing fingers barked. I'm Ling Han, son of the Ling clan head. And I believe you're in my way. Boss. Another cash cow. One of the lackeys laughed. This one looks like he's never even seen a real blade. Ha 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 ha. The bandits roared. To them, Ling Han was just a spoiled noble boy with a hero complex. Surrender, little master, the boss sneered, and maybe we only take your fingers instead of your life. Ling Han smiled, but it was a cold, jagged expression. I have a better idea. How about you 4 line up and I'll give each of you a nice, clean slit across the throat. It's much more efficient. You arrogant little shit. A bandit named Old 4 snapped. He pounced, his heavy cleaver whistling through the air, aimed directly at Ling Han's shoulder. I'm going to take that arm first. Shoo. The sword flash was so fast it didn't even leave a trail in the air. The heavy cleaver spun into the sky, clattering against the rocks. Old 4 was thrown back by a massive, invisible shockwave. He took 2 steps, his eyes wide and confused, before his head slid neatly off his shoulders. A geyser of hot, steaming blood sprayed into the canopy. The laughter stopped. The clearing went deathly silent. 1. Ling Han said, his blade clean and gleaming. The bandits were paralyzed. Lu Dong and his group stared, their brains unable to process what they had just seen. Old 4 was at least a 2nd-layer element gathering master, a veteran killer. And Ling Han had deleted him like a smudge on a map. Old 4 was careless. The boss roared, though his voice wavered. Kill him. Kill the brat. The remaining 3 charged, their weapons blurring in a desperate, chaotic frenzy. But to Ling Han, they moved like they were trapped in amber. He was an immortal grade master with the power of the 5th layer pulsing through his veins. He didn't need techniques. He didn't need sword chi. He simply moved through the gaps in their clumsy defenses. Shua, shua, shua. 3 strikes. 3 thuds. The boss didn't even have time to beg. His throat was open before he could draw another breath. In less than 10 seconds, the threat that had nearly wiped out Lu Dong's party was nothing more than 4 cooling corpses on the forest floor. Lu Dong, Li Hao, and the others sat in the dirt, shaking. They had fought for their lives for hours, and Ling Han had ended the war in the time it took to blink. Ling Han. Big brother Ling, Hao. Don't think too much about it, Ling Han said, wiping his blade as Lu Yutong stepped out from the trees. He looked at them, his expression turning serious. What are you doing this deep in the Seven Wind Mountains? This isn't a playground. The Da Yuan tournament, Chen Pengju stammered, still staring at the decapitated head of Old Four. We wanted to find medicine, to get stronger. Ling Han let out a short, dry laugh. You think because you found one bush of green spiritual fruits, the heavens are your personal pharmacy. Zhu Shuiyi pouted, her face pale. Don't tease us. We've found nothing but trouble. We even fell into a horrible cave a few miles back. It was freezing, filled with yin qi and the bones of 100 animals. Ling Han's heart skipped a beat. His eyes sharpened. A cave filled with yin qi and animal bones. Describe the entrance. Exactly. If his theory was right, these 5 idiots hadn't just found a cave. They had stumbled into the nursery of the red-scaled dragon snake. Where is that cave? Ling Han's voice was a low, dangerous rumble. Wait, you actually want to go to that hellhole? Lu Dong shouted, his eyes wide with disbelief. Ling Han's lips curled into a razor-thin smile. Aren't you all out here hunting for destiny? There is a fortune buried in that rot. Tell me, you didn't venture deep into the dark, did you? Of course not. There were bones everywhere, piles of them. It looked like a mass grave for the world. We saw that and ran for our lives, Zhu Shuiyi admitted, her voice trembling at the memory. As a woman, she didn't care if Ling Han found her fear amusing, she just wanted to stay far away from that stench of death. You're lucky, Ling Han nodded, his eyes turning cold. Had you been even a fraction more curious, you wouldn't be standing here breathing. You'd be part of the pile. Is there really an opportunity in there? Chen Pengju asked, his voice thick with a desperate hunger. He and Zhou Chong were the only ones still trapped in the body-refining tier. The thought of a breakthrough was more intoxicating than the fear of death. Perhaps, Ling Han said. But fate and the Reaper walk hand in hand. Think. Decide. Is it worth your lives? The group stood in a heavy, suffocating silence. After a long moment, they steeled their nerves. We'll take you there, they said, their voices grim. As they hiked, Ling Han turned to Li Hao. Congratulations. You've formed Saber Chi. You've finally stopped being a boy with a blade and started being a saber wielder. Saber Chi. The words hit the group like a physical blow. Lu Dong and the others felt a surge of raw, jagged envy, while Zhu Shuiyi's eyes shone with pride. Li Hao let out a rough, simple laugh. He had spent 13 years obsessed with the blade, bleeding for it, and only in the shadow of his own execution had the spark finally ignited. Big brother Ling, Li Hao said, his fighting spirit surging like a tide, let's spar. But, have some mercy. I know you're a monster. Ling Han didn't speak. He drew his sword in a blur of silver. Shua. 2 flashes of sword chi erupted, dancing like lethal ghosts in the air before him. Li Hao's jaw dropped. The spark he had nearly died to achieve, Ling Han wielded double of with the casual ease of a man swatting a fly. I'm never comparing myself to you again, Li Hao muttered, shaking his head. You're a damn freak. A freak. The others echoed, their awe turning into a protective layer of respect. But Ling Han wasn't satisfied. She was the bottom rung of a ladder that reached the heavens. He had been an alchemy emperor in his last life, in this one, he would be a god of war. City by city, country by country, he would outgrow them all. They reached the cliff half an hour later. It was a wall of damp, suffocating moss, emerald dark because the sun never touched its face. There, Zhu Shuiyi whispered, pointing to a jagged, inconspicuous slit in the rock. Wait here, Ling Han commanded. He leapt into the darkness. The air inside was thick, wet, and smelled of ancient decay. The floor was a treacherous slide of slime and gore. At the bottom, a massive cavern opened up, carpeted in the shattered bones of men and beasts. It was a cathedral of death. Ling Han knelt in the filth. His fingers brushed against something hard and cold. A crimson scale, larger than a man's palm and tough as forged iron. Red-scaled dragon snake, he hissed. He found the inner passage, a narrow, pulsing vein of shadow where the stench of rot was absolute. The beast was in there. Sleeping. Dreaming of blood. He retreated, emerging back into the light. He looked at the 5 survivors. It's the dragon snake. The beast king of the element gathering tier. They recoiled. The dragon snake wasn't just a beast, it was a legend of slaughter. Its inner core can be forged into a transcending origin pill, Ling Han said, his voice dropping into a seductive, brutal whisper. 1 pill, and you jump an entire cultivation layer instantly. If you want a seat at the Huyang Academy, if you want to be more than just small-town nobodies, this is the price. He watched them. This was his test. Would they cower, or would they climb? Let's do it. They roared, their fear turning into a savage, focused resolve. No regrets. Good, Ling Han said, his eyes flashing. Now, go catch me a bright wool sheep. A sheep. Chen Pengju blinked. Why are we feeding the monster? Stupid. Zhu Shuiyi snapped, cuffing him across the head. We aren't feeding it. Or delivering its execution. We're going to lace that sheep with a poison that will turn its insides to glass. Dash dash dash. While Lu Dong's group vanished into the brush to hunt the bait, Ling Han sat amidst the damp silence of the mountain, his hands moving with the precision of a god. He wasn't just mixing herbs, he was crafting a death sentence. To the rest of the world, these ingredients were harmless. But to the red-scaled dragon snake, they were liquid fire, designed to tear its unique biology apart from the inside out. After 3 grueling days, the group returned. Chen Pengju hauled a bright wool sheep, a creature of silk and soft muscle, onto the grass. Its coat shimmered like a taunt. Ling Han didn't hesitate. He forced the specialized drug down the animal's throat and sliced its leg open. The metallic tang of blood instantly polluted the air. He heaved the bleeding animal into the mouth of the cave. The beast is a king, Ling Han whispered, retreating toward a massive boulder. It won't touch what it hasn't killed itself. Now, we wait for the vibration. They didn't have to wait long. The ground began to moan. A low, rhythmic thrumming started beneath their boots, escalating into a violent tremor. Pung! The entrance of the cave exploded. A crimson blur shot out like a bolt from a siege engine. It was a nightmare of scales and muscle, its diameter wider than a bucket, surging out in an endless, undulating coil. 100 meters, then 150, finally, 200 meters of predatory power lay sprawled on the earth. Its neck membranes pulsed with a sickening, woo-woo-woo, sound, the vibration of a god-tier predator sensing a breach. Why isn't it dead? Lu Dong gasped, his face draining of color. The snake was thrashing, its massive tail whipping through the air and shattering boulders into dust with a single crack. Dead. Ling Han's voice was a jagged rasp. This is a 9th-layer king with the blood of dragons in its veins. You don't kill a god with one meal. You just poison its pride. SISI. The serpent's head snapped toward their hiding spot. Its sense of smell was a death sentence. It didn't care about the sheep anymore, it wanted the irritants. It surged toward them, a mountain of red scales and rotting stench. Yu Tong. Now. Ling Han roared. He didn't retreat. He drew his sword and threw himself into the path of the juggernaut. Lu Yutong followed, her own blade singing as it cleared the scabbard. They danced on the edge of a razor. Even at the 9th layer, Lu Yutong was a candle beside this inferno. The dragon snake's defense was impenetrable to normal steel. It was a ruler of the tier, a beast that could crush a human master with a single twitch of its tail. Ling Han's aura exploded. He wasn't holding back. 4 flashes of sword chi ignited along his blade, the silver light of a master. Pooh. 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 4 jagged wounds opened on the snake's hide. His physical blade bounced off the scales, but the chi bit deep, carving through the ancient armor. Lu Dong's group watched from the sidelines, paralyzed, their mouths agape. 4 flashes. He was a monster in human skin. The snake counterattacked with a scream of air. Its tail caught the earth, launching a shrapnel storm of jagged rocks. Ling Han's body was peppered with red welts, blood blooming across his robes. He didn't grunt. He didn't flinch. Wang. His 5 elements origin nuclei accelerated until they were a white-hot blur. The lone wolf's blood roared in his ears, and the indestructible heaven scroll began to stitch his flesh back together even as it was being torn. It's trying to reach the water. Ling Han shouted over the din of shattering stone. He felt his origin power draining like water from a cracked jar. He slammed a return origin pill into his mouth, his jaw set in a grim line. If it hits the river, the yang poison is neutralized. We kill it here, or we die in these mountains. The snake was no longer just angry, it was terrified. The yang fire Ling Han had fed it was melting its yin core. It turned its massive head, intending to bolt for the nearby stream. Stay down. Ling Han lunged, his sword a rainbow of lethal light. A massive shockwave from the snake's tail caught Ling Han midair, sent him tumbling back through the dirt. His ribs groaned under the pressure. The 9th layer is no joke, he thought, tasting copper. In this tier, the gap is a canyon. Lu Yutong stepped in, her sword arts falling like a torrential rain, a high-level yellow-grade technique that draped the serpent in a veil of steel. She was the shield, he was the spear. Ling Han and Lu Yutong were no longer fighting a battle, they were consuming the contents of an apothecary like madmen. Ling Han slammed return origin pills down his throat to keep his dantian from burning out, while Lu Yutong swallowed healing elixirs in a desperate bid to keep her internal organs from collapsing. A head-on clash with a beast king was suicide, and her body was screaming under the strain. But Ling Han's pills were masterpieces. They didn't just heal, they fueled the lone wolf's blood he had taught her, pushing her battle prowess into a soaring, violent trajectory. If that serpent hadn't been poisoned, they would be carrion by now. But the yin-yang conflict inside the beast was turning its blood into a corrosive acid. Green ichor sprayed from its exploding scales, melting the very rocks it touched. A lethal, miasmic fog rose from its hide, a poison meant to kill ninth layer masters instantly. CC. The dragon snake felt the cold hand of death. It didn't want to fight anymore, it wanted the river. It lunged toward the water, its massive body thrashing with a terrifying, mindless energy. Lu Yutong's eyes turned into chips of frozen glass. She was exhausted, broken, and pushed to the brink, but she looked at Ling Han and saw the weight of his expectations. She would not let him down. One sword of heaven's martial arts determines the universe. She shrieked. Don't. Ling Han roared, his heart leaping into his throat. She didn't listen. She forcibly squeezed her origin nucleus, risking a permanent internal explosion for one moment of godlike power. She became one with her blade, a streak of white light descending like a guillotine. Pooh. The blade didn't just cut, it detonated. A massive flash of sword chi, the very thing she had chased for years, erupted from her steel. It sheared through the impossible armor of the dragon snake, severing the last third of its body. Green blood erupted like a geyser. The serpent shrieked, a sound of pure, primordial agony, as its tail section was left twitching in the dirt. Lu Yutong collapsed. Ling Han caught her before she hit the mud, his face a mask of fury and concern. Are you insane? You almost blew yourself up. I did it, she whispered, her face pale but her eyes burning with a manic joy. I formed sword chi, Ling Han. I did it for you. Ling Han sighed, hoisting her onto his back. You silly girl. If you ever pull a stunt like that again, I'm smacking your behind. The dragon snake lay still, 100 meters of crimson muscle quivering in the mud, unable to reach the water that would have saved it. Big brother Ling. Lu Dong and the others raced over, looking at the dead monster and then at Ling Han as if he were a demon. They had expected to find corpses, instead, they found a slayer. But the peace was short-lived. Ha 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 ha. A red-scaled dragon snake. What a haul. 6 figures stepped from the riverside brush. In the lead was a young man with the pampered air of a high-born brat, flanked by 5 black-clad enforcers. They walked with the arrogance of those who had never been told, no. Carry it back for me, the young man commanded his lackeys, not even glancing at Ling Han's blood-soaked group. I'll show grandfather what a great hunter I am. That's our kill. Zhu Shuiyi screamed, her face flushed with rage. Li Hao stepped forward, his hand white-knuckled on his saber. Ling Han felt Lu Yutong's breath on his neck. He didn't move. He didn't even draw his sword. He just smiled. A dark, predatory grin. Let them have it, he whispered. The 5 enforcers marched toward the serpent, laughing. To them, Ling Han was just a wounded boy. They reached for the scales, ready to hoist the prize. Thump. The dead snake suddenly coiled. Its head shot out like a spring-loaded trap, its jaws snapping shut around the first man's waist. Crunch. He was severed in 2 instantly, his legs taking 3 confused steps before falling into the grass. The snake's body, powered by its final, post-mortem neural fire, whipped around the other 4. Ka 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 ka. The sound of shattering ribs and pulverizing skulls echoed through the clearing. The 4 men were squeezed into a singular, unrecognizable lump of gore and black fabric, a meat graveyard held together by crimson scales. The snake let out one final, hissing sigh and went truly cold. The pampered young man stood alone, his jaw hanging open, his boots splattered with the blood of his entire escort. He looked at the meat cube that used to be his guards, then slowly turned his head toward Ling Han. Ling Han adjusted Lu Yutong on his back and stepped over the severed legs of the first guard. Now, he said, his voice dropping into a terrifyingly soft tone. What was that you were saying about your good fortune being as high as the sky?